The boys' limbs tried their best to stop the other party's singing. Luke's anxiety was all noticed by Lefiya. She injected magic power as a show and hung the bomb in front of his eyes. This is a tactic to lure the enemy to waver and become restless. This is the essence of the decoy attack taught by Reveria to manipulate and lure the enemy into action. Luke's hesitation was obvious. And what he does next is in her hands. As expected, she approached from the right. Lefiya said in a low voice, and she also took a step forward, following his shadow to his eyes. Her body fell into the opponent's arms, the blunt corner of the long sword, and her hand glowed. The short sword bounced the weapon away, and the short staff pressed into the boy's trembling face. Penetrate, the right arrow, the last text of the corner. With an easily completed spell, Lefiya ended the fight. The flashing arrow that was sure to kill was not released. Disarm it moments before launch. The short stick only emits light, and the magic power, concentrated in it, dissipates like countless particles of light. The magic circle also disappeared beneath her feet. A moment later, the sword leapt from the boy's hand and plunged into the ground with a crash. Lefiya cancels the magic to declare victory. Luke, pointed out by the team, was as still as a stone statue. Nano and the others who were watching nervously also stood there in a daze. I won, Luke. So you have to obey my orders. Hearing Lefiya say this as she lowered her staff, Luke took 1 step, 2 steps, and staggered back. If the levels were the same, perhaps the battle would be more intense, but it would still be Lefiya who would win in the end. Their experience is very different. The difference in the number of times they crossed the field is very large. Luke and everyone in the 7th squad never experienced overwhelming irrationality. This is the decisive difference between the two. Luke froze in place with an expression of disbelief. Seeing him like this, Lefiya panicked and thought, I overreacted. Originally, he was just planning to persuade her, but now, perhaps even her reserve has been completely defeated by her. Lefiya was about to drop her inspiring attitude now and rush to give advice, but at this moment her ears twitched. That voice. Ah, really? It's really pitiful. While fighting with Luke, Lefiya was the only one who was always on the lookout for signs of an attack from a large group of monsters or abnormal situation. At this time she muttered like a complaint, and suddenly turned her head to look in a certain direction. It was a passage that led to the corridor. Just as Lefiya predicted, it didn't take long for a group of a certain adventurer to rush onto the road. No way, the number is too exaggerated. They walked right past Luke and the others, as well as Lefiya, who cast her disapproving eyes. The 7th squad, who didn't know what had happened, seemed lost, and the only one who understood the situation was Lefiya. Luke, please take the sword. Everyone gather around. Lefiya assembled her dagger and staff again, waited for the passage where the adventurers came and shouted. They forced them in. In the next moment, an army of countless monsters invaded the hall. Could that be it? A parade of monsters. Nano and the others, who finally understood the situation, let out a groan. Crisis prevention frequently adopted by adventurers as well as common methods. The exceptional students realized that they were forced to become substitutes, and their faces turned livid due to the number of monsters. Let's attack. There was only one person, except the active adventurer Lefiya, who maintained her calm and ignited arrogance at the same time. That's right, this is something common in dungeons. Normal, one of many developments. Squad, please pay attention. Maintain the usual lineup of 4. Lefiya quickly gave instructions. Luke lunged at the long sword inserted into the ground, and Nano and the others quickly joined him. At this moment, the monster army in sight can be described as monster parade. They form a long line of serpents that extend lengthwise. The monsters of different races changed their targets from the adventurers they were chasing before to Lefiya and the others, screaming and trying to eat them directly. In the face of this power and the total number that seemed stupid to count, an army of monsters that even the students of the school district rarely see. Nano shrank. Lefiya also thought about running away with those adventurers, but she only fought with Luke, not to mention that running away wouldn't solve the problem at all, so she finally chose to fight on the spot. Instead of spreading it to others besides them and third-level adventurers. How about annihilating monsters with the 7th squad? She made such a judgment after taking her own combat power into the calculation. In front is the Fawn Liger group of monsters. Behind is Minotaur, Hellhound, and Unicorn Rabbit holding a stone axe. She quickly understood the composition of the formation, squinting her dark blue eyes. Although large monsters are also troublesome, you must be careful when they join up behind with small monsters and medium monsters. To be precise, it is the fire breath attack and throwing natural weapons. Although the 7th squad is strong enough, it is very likely that mistakes will occur if it is attacked from a long distance. Therefore, Lefiya made a decisive decision and decided to clear the enemy's back line. I will defeat the back line. The vanguard will be handed over to you. Before hearing the students' voices agreeing to come down, Lefiya kicked the ground and jumped up. Make a wish in the name of Vish. She jumped high, attracting the eyes of the speechless students and the monster looking up, and chanted a spell. As the chant resounded everywhere, Lefiya drew a smooth arc in the air, and landed with a heavy impact. At the same time, as previously announced, the Unicorn Rabbit and Cerberus were disintegrated. The Tears of Ashes dagger held in his right hand flashed 3 times like a baton, playing the chorus of dying screams. Immediately afterwards, she broke into a gallop. Walking through the group, massacring many black dogs with sparks coming out of their mouths, without giving them a chance to breathe, the white rabbits hurriedly threw stone axes, and she knocked them all down. The natural weapon that turned into gunpowder widened the rabbits' round eyes, and then a silver light flashed, and many heads were cut off together. Ancestors of the forest, respond to my voice and come to the grassland. After defeating the last row of enemies, she slashed through a wave of fangs and with her parallel chant at the same time. The powerful singing voice and even the violent, magic power, radiate involuntarily attract the monster's attention. With her exaggerated movements, she single-handedly attracted the center and back row of the enemy, only handing over the monsters in the front row to the students, and began a beautiful and heroic, fighting dance. She devastates hordes of monsters. Bathed in the crying of Milia, who had been shocked since the battle with Luke, Lefiya concentrated and divided the mantis monster, Crystal Mantis. The body made of crystals turned into countless fragments and spread out like a dream. Lefiya ignored them and instead of using magic, she harvested the monster army with pure hand-to-hand combat. Come on, fairy ring. Please lend me strength. The gently woven, parallel chant built up the summoning magic fairy ring, and then did not activate, but turned into standby mode. Using the effect of the special skill, Double Pursuit, it turns into a small wrist-shaped magic circle, wrapped around the left wrist holding the short staff. Release that light, the sacred wood longbow. Just as she was preparing for the next bullet, in response to an emergency, she hit her head in the large minotaur monster. The Cerberus in shadow is approaching from the left. The one-sided devastation made him furious, and he crawled forward, trying to pierce his fangs into Lefiya's soft flesh. The dagger in his right hand had just cut other enemies and it was too late to deal with it. In the corner of Lefiya's heart, like an elf, she found it indecent, and at the same time, she aimed at the enemy's face and mercilessly kicked her into the air. During her training so far, she has experienced this kicking trick of werewolf bet countless times. Although this is just a sample, but Elves' own leg 4 is a murder weapon. The Cerberus was kicked with its jaw crushed and its entire head exploded, with chunks of flesh and blood splashing everywhere. The skirt was then lifted up, revealing her slender thighs like white peaches. Saying goodbye to her old self and determined to change, a scene was engraved in her mind. She uses this as a reference. Imitate. Design. So come closer. The action to get closer to the White Witch. Her figure has always lived in her heart, and now she wants to revive it with her own body. Facing the elf for optimal moves, the Minotaurs, armed with large stone axes, attacked boldly. They will crush you with their size and numbers. Lefiya'S response was action. Pursuing liberation.